Well, thank you. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you everybody for attending and for your interest in our research. Thank you very much to EDSA for hosting this event. I'm going to whiz through quite quickly to give time at the end for questions. And I will say straight away, there is no way I can go into depth for every single country that we looked at in this study. If I attempted to do that, we would be here till this time tomorrow. So I'm going to take a fairly high level run through the research, how we did it, and some of the major findings. If you want more detail, there is a huge supplement to the published paper, and there'll be some links in a minute. You can download the supplement to the paper, and in there's a lot more detail, country by country, on our findings. So if you're particularly interested in some of the data, the estimates we produced for a specific country or a specific few countries, that is in the supplement. We're not going to be able to get into that level of detail today. And Gert, who's here, I can't see him at the minute. Gert's asked me to speak, but he will be around for the Q&A at the end. He will join me for the Q&A. So, what have we been up to? Brian, Gert and I started several years ago working on updated estimates and of births and populations of people with Down syndrome, beginning with looking at some estimates for the US. And I think our first paper came out in 2015, and that looked at births in the US during the last century and the impact of terminations since the 70s. We went on to look at data in detail for Massachusetts. That paper came out the following year. Also that year, we produced an estimate of population for the whole of the US, and that one included an analysis of age, racial, ethnic backgrounds of people with Down syndrome in the US and looking at differences there. We then went on to do more detailed work in 9 other states that had more data available. That paper was published a few years ago. And then we moved on to Europe, which is a paper that's published last autumn. A huge paper. It's taken us a long time. It's a team effort, but I must say that Gert is certainly the team member who spent most time on the field. Without his dogged perseverance to dig out every last bit of data we could find, I don't think we would have ever got there. And many thanks to a lot of the members of EDSA who are here. A lot of you helped us considerably in identifying sources of data in your own countries that was invaluable in putting these estimates together. So this paper came out last autumn, and that's what I'm going to focus on today. We are continuing with this work, so we continue to track data in the US, and we have a fact sheet available on that. That's freely downloadable, and each year we update that as new data comes out. We update our estimates and update that fact sheet. We have produced one for Europe as well, so based on the paper that was published last year, and again we hope to continue to update the European estimates as data continues to be released and available to us. We're also continuing work looking at some other countries, and we're exploring how we might model some of the trends in birth rates to estimate the impact of technological change and social changes and policy changes over time. So we are still carrying on with some work in this area. So why are we interested in birth numbers and populations? Well, governments and non-profits need good information about births and populations if we're going to plan services effectively. we want to have some idea how many children there are in a given country, how many of them are in school, how many adults there are, how many of them are likely to be of employment age, and how are the populations evolving? Do we have populations with more old people than we used to, and so on. If we don't have good data, then it is largely guesswork, and that guesswork can be quite inaccurate. There are quite a few examples, if you go back 10, 20, 30 years, of the kinds of guesses we were making based on limited data of birth rates and trying to extrapolate that to population size. And you can end up easily overestimating your population, for example, by at least double if you're not careful, if you use that, you use those kinds of approaches. So it is important that we've got good data. It's also important for us to be monitoring what the impact of new technologies, policy changes are over time, and how that might affect population patterns in the future, in terms of future planning. And you'll see in our findings from Europe, there've been some quite dramatic changes in terms of live birth rates over the years, and we can probably expect to see some pretty dramatic changes in the future. So how do we go about producing good estimates of the number of babies being born with Down syndrome and the number of people living with Down syndrome? Unfortunately, very few countries count all the births of children with Down syndrome in their country. In Europe, there are a few. The UK and certainly England and Wales have data going back to 1980, which is based on hospital reporting. The Netherlands and Denmark have national data, and for more recent years, France has been collecting national data. There's also this EuroCat, which is a Europe-wide registry of births of babies with congenital conditions. As you can see from this little map here, it's mostly made up of regional registries, but those are then used to estimate population level statistics. So there are those sources of data. There are some additional sources of data in countries that are not part of EuroCat, and as I said, there's a few countries that also have some national level data. But by and large, most countries don't count all the births. No country includes Down syndrome as a criteria on their census, so we don't have any national census data on the number of people living with Down syndrome. There have been a few population studies that of people with Down syndrome, and there have been some studies of life expectancy that give us data on population prevalence and expected life. So given the lack of data and the other bits of patchy data, how do we put all of that together to estimate the birth and estimate the populations? And I'm going to keep saying the word estimate. All of these numbers are estimations that we've produced, except where you've got a country that does have a reliable count. You are inevitably dealing with estimates, but we're pretty confident they're fairly close estimates. So there is widespread data on births of children in general. So just about every country has data on that, and data on that going back quite a long time. And most of those data sets will include the age of the mother when the child was born. And we know that the relationship between the age of mothers and the chance of having a baby with Down syndrome is clear, and there's multiple studies have looked at that, and there is quite a well understood, quite well evidenced equation for the chance of for that chance, and that's what you can see on that graph and written out there. So if you happen to know how many births there were in a country and the ages of the mothers, you can apply that equation and you can work out quite accurately that the number of babies that you would expect to be born, live born, with Down syndrome. So that's quite a good starting point. That gives us the ability to calculate that for most countries going back quite a long period of time in most places. Obviously, since the advent of screening, the number of babies we might expect to be born is not necessarily the number of babies that are being born. So we have to make some further adjustments there. For population, just to run through this slide, that in the absence of national data, therefore, so we could look at live birth rates in different parts of countries from the regional local studies that are available, and then we can construct an estimate for that country based on those regional local studies that are available, or the regional data sets. Sometimes we've had to dig around for slightly more indirect data. So some countries may publish data on the number of invasive prenatal procedures. There may have been data on the number of hospital admissions of children with Down syndrome. So those kinds of data sets we can use and use them to validate our estimates and cross-check our estimates. There are several studies on survival, which allows us to construct survival curves. So if you've worked out the number of babies that are being born each year, you can then apply a survival curve to each group of babies and work out, therefore, over the subsequent years, how many of them remain alive, which is how you end up with your population estimates. Obviously, with these estimates, we want to be confident that they're real and accurate. And there's a few ways of doing that. Obviously, where a country has an actual count, we can check our model against real counts. So we can, if our model relies on starting with births of all children and then applying the equation to work out the number of babies born in the absence of termination and so on, and then making the adjustments, we can then see, does that actually match the counts? And in countries where there's partial data, we can then do that for regions and so on. For the European study, we had some data on the numbers of people with Down syndrome alive by age group. So we were able to compare what our model said there should be and what these studies in those countries found. Death certificates will frequently reference Down syndrome as a cause of death. So where data on death certificates was available, we are able to confirm whether the model is predicting the right number of deaths in a given year against that data. So there's a number of ways we can validate whether our model is making sense and tallies with the bits and pieces of data that are available. And you can, there's more detail on that in the supplement for the paper as to how we did that. So before I shoot into the findings, I just wanted to flag a few points about interpreting population statistics that, if you like, kind of gotchas when you're reading some of this stuff, particularly if you're looking at the data coming out of different registries, different countries, different studies. One of the first things is not everybody reports the same thing in terms of birth prevalence. So some studies will report and some registries will report birth prevalence as a total birth prevalence, which is the total number of babies with the condition detected either prenatally or postnatally over the total number of live births. So in that scenario, the prevalence includes not only live births, but miscarriages, stillbirths, terminations, and will always be a substantially higher number than the live birth prevalence, which is if you just include the live births over the total number of live births. And in all the modeling we're doing, we're interested in calculating the live birth prevalence because that gives you the number of babies born, and we can go on to calculate population from that. But that is worth being aware of that difference when if you are looking at certain registries' data, is to just check exactly what they're including in their prevalence numbers. The other thing that's worth bearing in mind when thinking about these statistics is the number of terminations that are counted is not the same as the number of births prevented. So sometimes people will look at this data and say, well, we've counted 1,000 terminations in a country. That must mean that 1,000 babies would otherwise have been born with Down syndrome. That doesn't hold because the rates of miscarriage and pregnancies with Down syndrome are higher than among other pregnancies, and it's fairly substantial. So you cannot just assume that the number, and a lot of countries will have termination counts. You can't just use that as a number to say, well, in the absence of screening, we'd have seen those babies born. So the births prevented, if you like, that the number of the amount by which births have been reduced due to screening is the number of pregnancies terminated less what we would have expected to have been lost naturally anyway. And then I think it's the last of my gotchas. Live birth prevalence is not the same as population prevalence. So the proportion of babies at birth as a proportion of all babies born is your live birth prevalence. The proportion of people with Down syndrome in the population doesn't stay the same throughout their lifespan. People with Down syndrome have a shorter lifespan, and therefore over time their population prevalence falls. So if you multiply live birth prevalence by total population, which was a way we used to look at it when there was very, very little data years ago, you will end up with a substantial overestimation of population. So if you've got live birth data, which is often more readily available than population data, please don't use live birth prevalence to calculate populations. Right, so with that, our European study. So our goals were to estimate non-selective live birth prevalence, by which we mean the live birth prevalence that we would have seen in the absence of any screening or termination, the actual live birth prevalence, so that is the proportion of babies born with Down syndrome. The difference between those is the reduction percentage because of selective terminations, and then to calculate the population prevalence for European, I think we did 39 European countries. I apologize to our Turkish friends, we didn't get that far south. Yeah, so we then grouped the countries for analysis into 4 regions, northern, eastern, southern, and western. We got data from national registries, governments, and many charities around Europe helped us find that data. We modeled our survival curves to reflect improvements in medical care over time. We had to make some adaptations for former Eastern Bloc countries. So in general, the improvements in rates of in life expectancy have not been moving at the same pace in Eastern Europe as they have in other parts of Europe. So we made some adjustments for that. And then calculated the birth selective terminations and deaths in 39 countries. And we did the validations I referred to earlier. To dig into that in detail, that you can read the paper, and as I said, there's a huge supplement of which goes down into country level data. So our headline findings for the latest period we analysed, which was the period 2011 to 2015, we estimated just over 8,000 annual live births of children with Down syndrome across Europe, across those 39 countries. In the absence of selective termination, we would have expected around a little over 17,000, and therefore the rate of reduction of live birth prevalence was about 54%. There's wide variety there. So in Malta, where terminations are illegal, there was no reduction, and in Spain, which I think was the highest, was 83%. And that graph is a bit, I don't know how clearly that's coming through on your screens, but you can get that from the paper. That charts the live birth prevalence in each country grouped by region. So the length of the bar, including the green and the blue shaded areas, is the total expected life prevalence. The blue part of the bar is the actual life prevalence. And so the green part of the bar is the amount by which life prevalence was reduced, and then the percentage figures give you the size of that reduction for each country, and then I think they're totaled as well for each region, and then we've got totals at the bottom for the whole of Europe. So you see quite a variety of differences even within regions in terms of reduction rates, overall current live birth prevalence in different countries. Highest in lowest in Southern Europe. Non-selective live birth prevalence, so the expected births were highest in Southern Europe, and the reduction was also the highest in Southern Europe. Interestingly, there seems to be a bit of a relationship there in terms of the rate of reduction and the expected non-selective live birth prevalence. And there could be a number of reasons for that. The most obvious likely to be that where there are screening programs, they tend to focus on mothers over 35. So you're going to have more mothers over 35 if you have a high non-selective live birth prevalence expected. And therefore the screening programs may be targeting more mothers in those areas, and then you end up with a higher reduction rate. But there are lots of factors likely to be at play in these numbers. There was even within regions, there's considerable variation, as you can see. So in Northern Europe, Ireland, where abortions until quite recently were illegal, very low reduction rate and high live birth prevalence. Other countries much lower live birth prevalence. That charts live births over time. So this is actual number of babies born from 1935 to 2015. The darker blue is the actual live births, and the pale shaded blue is the additional births that would have been in the absence of termination. So that's become a growing proportion since the late 1970s, when detection screening began. I think we've got I'll talk a bit more about the trends actually when we've got the prevalence graphs rather than the absolute numbers. So here we are. This shows live birth prevalence. This is a proportion of babies with Down syndrome. The axis is numbers per 10,000 of live births on the left, and then it's over time. So as you can see, in the early part of the century, things were fairly flat at about 22, 23 per 10,000. After the Second World War, we saw a slight rise in the proportion of babies being born. And after that, the live birth prevalence started to fall quite rapidly. And that was that was more widespread contraception being available. So people choosing not to have children later in life and using contraception, and that brought even before amniocentesis, which was the first method of detecting the babies prenatally, was available. And that's the social choices around contraception, the availability of contraception, had reduced the live birth rate by about 50%. became more available in the 70s, late 70s, as a procedure for older mothers, but really prenatal screening didn't get going substantially till the 80s and beyond. And there you can see, so looking over to the right of the graph, the pale green, blue-green line that goes up is what would have happened to live birth prevalence over that period of time, and the continuing blue line is what actually happened. So you can see since the 1980s, there's been a distinct rise in the expected numbers of babies with Down syndrome being born, and that is a consequence of people choosing to raise their families later in life. And in the absence of screening, that would have pretty much eradicated the drop we'd seen since post-war. But the more widespread availability of prenatal screening has kept live birth prevalence around mostly static, really. I mean, it fell a little bit when it was first introduced, and then at the moment, it's for Europe, we're hovering around the 10 in 10,000 live births. But as you can see, the rate of reduction has steadily grown over time, even though the live birth prevalence hasn't fallen any further. Again, you can dig into the paper for a bit more detail here, but that's that same graph but broken out for different regions. So you see there are some differences in different parts of Europe. Western, Northern and Southern Europe all started seeing increases in expected live birth prevalence at around a similar kind of time, and screening being rolled out at similar sorts of rates, and therefore that divergence is generally similar. But you can see the Southern Europe, if you look at the Southern Europe graph, you can see that the rise in expected births was more pronounced than other parts of Europe, and at the same time the fall in actual live births has been sharper. Eastern Europe, similar trend, but slightly further behind in time. The rollout of screening in Eastern Europe and former East Bloc countries has generally been a bit behind the rest of Europe, but similar trend emerging there now. That was analysis of former East Bloc and non-former East Bloc, and then Europe, and we've popped the US in for comparison there. So the trends in the US quite similar in terms of the overall trend, although in the US the impact of screening has not been as great as in Europe. So you can see they've actually seen some continuing rise in live birth prevalence, and their reduction rate is not as high as for Europe. So populations, for 2015, we estimated 417,000 people living in Europe in those 39 countries. We estimated that if there had not been in prior years selective terminations, there would have been a population of about 572,000. So the population reduction of about 27%. And so this is a bit similar, this graph's similar to the one on live births. We've got population prevalence across the bottom. The blue bar was the is population prevalence as estimated. Add the green bar for what there would have been in the absence of screening to make the total and the percentages of the reduction. The big drivers of population has been changing life expectancy. So aside from the numbers of babies actually born, improvements in medical care and access to high quality medical care made a huge difference over time. And you can see that on some of these graphs. So this shows you, we haven't got a key on here. The colored bands are age groups, five-year age groups. So the bottom blue band would be your 0 to 4-year-olds, and the next one up would be your 5 to 9 and so on. So as you can see in Western, Northern and Southern Europe, the population of young people with Down syndrome, so under 20 or under 15, pretty much peaked in the 70s or 80s in those regions, whilst the overall population continued rising because of the effect of improving medical care and therefore proportionally more and more older people with Down syndrome alive. Estimates suggest that we have now peaked in terms of the overall total number of people with Down syndrome living in those parts of Europe. It's still rising in Eastern Europe as medical care continues to get better across Eastern European countries. So the bars are total population. The lines on there on the right axis are prevalence proportion of the population, not live birth. I don't know why it says live birth. That's not. That must be population prevalence, I think. We then explored. One of the things we did is try to see what sorts of explanations might be for some of the differences between countries. And one of the things we looked at was, is there any relationship between national income and the rates of reduction in different countries? And there was a fairly direct link among countries where GDP per person in the population was under 35,000. So these would be countries that have a lower national income than others in Europe. But amongst that group of countries, there was quite a distinct relationship. As GDP rises, so too does the reduction rate. That holds less if you look at all of the countries together. So countries with higher income per capita are continue to be more likely to have higher reduction rates, but the relationship isn't so strong, and it starts to flatten out. And it's interesting that there's still quite a lot of variation there. So despite that being a kind of general trend, there's still a lot of things varying. Interesting to note that there's no country in Europe with GDP per head of over 30,000 where the reduction rate is less than 40%. But that's where you would find the US there with the orange X in that quadrant. Unpicking exactly why this is not easy. There's things working both ways, I think, in terms of influence here. Clearly, countries have to have a certain amount of wealth in order to run large screening programs. So you can't have a national screening program without the ability to pay for it. So less wealthy countries don't have them. But beyond that, the factors start to get a bit more complicated, and there are reasons why we would expect some of these correlations anyway. With more people choosing to stay in education and have their children later, you would expect that to be have a positive effect on GDP, but also for the reasons I explained earlier, it's likely to increase reduction rates as well if screening programs are more focused on older parents. So I'm picking out that there's a lot of variations there, and clearly social attitudes, the way screening programs are operated, countries with who take very seriously informed consent and informing and educating people before they make choices in the screening process are likely to have lower reduction rates. So there's quite a lot to unpick in there. Looking at things we couldn't answer and that we would quite like to answer in the future, we weren't able to look at ethnic background or socioeconomic status in populations in Europe. And we have been able to do a little bit of that in the US, and it's clear that there are differences. I don't think that's too surprising, but there are differences between different ethnic groups in terms of choices and in terms of so in terms of screening choices, but also in terms of child rearing choices and so on. So we weren't able to do that for Europe, but that would be an interesting follow-up. Also, our data doesn't really cover the impacts of newer non-invasive prenatal screening tests that are starting to be rolled out across Europe. Now, our assumption is that that will lead to higher detection rates and therefore likely higher rates of elective terminations. But at the moment, we don't have any data that really, certainly for Europe, we don't have any data that really allows us to look at that properly. But over the next few years, that data should start to emerge. There's some data out in the US now that ought to be, well, that could be starting to signal differences, but as yet we haven't yet spotted any big impact there. But I think over the next 3 to 5 years, that will be a key thing that we'll be able to do, is as new data comes out, is to look at the impact of these new technologies and their rollout. And we're certainly planning to do that. Those are links to the papers, well, not all the papers, but this is the European paper and the 2 bigger American papers. I think they're all currently free access, even the European one, which they've made free access more recently. And those are the links to the fact sheets. So I think we've got, yeah, about 15 minutes for questions.
Thanks a lot, Frank. Yes, we got some comments and some questions. If you go maybe to the Q&A,
Okay.
for first, most probably we'll need help from Fulya. Yeah, for Fulya, could you maybe translate this first? I think that is a Turkish, yeah, in Q&A.
Our translator can translate it better than me. If you change the language to English, you can hear Frank in English. It's okay.
Hang on, I might have to stop sharing. I haven't got that option.
Yeah.
Yes, I can now.
Okay, then. Let me
Thank
read
you.
it in Turkish.
Yeah, Frank, did you succeed to translate? Or...
You can hear me, yeah. Well, yeah, policies do make a difference. So the question was to what extent do different countries' policies make, and can we calculate that? Yes, policies make a difference, and we can see that in the time trends as screening was rolled out. First of all, the amniocentesis was available for older mothers. Then the blood serum tests started to be developed, and initially they were only available for older mothers. And then country after country made them more widely available to mothers of all ages. And we can see over time that's had an impact on the reduction rate. So the policy choices make a difference. There's also some hint, if you look at the country to country data, that the ways in which screening programs are managed and informed consent and counselling is carried out is likely to have a difference. So we are able to look at that. If the question about calculation was can we accurately estimate what impact all those different policies have, probably not. We are looking at ways in which we can model different the impact of specific policies in different countries at different times, and what they've done to trends over time. But I don't know if we're going to be able to do that or not yet. And if we can, it'll probably only be for some countries, but that might then give us a model that allows us to make some predictions moving forward. Did you want me to just work through the questions, Dinka?
Yeah, please. Okay, this is the next comments.
And Gert, I can't see you at the moment, but please jump in. If,
okay, in the absence. Okay, maybe Gert.
I thought it was a clear answer. You have some differences. There have been some studies, for instance, which compared the UK, the Netherlands, and Denmark in their use of screening. In Denmark, people tend to do the screening, nearly all of them. While in the Netherlands and the UK, you also get offered the screening, but much more people do not do it. And why is that? Well, it seems to have to do with the way the counseling was started. Around the time the new screening policies were introduced. In Denmark, it was introduced like, well, that's something we do. It's the normal thing to do. In the Netherlands, it was always brought as a moral problem. And I don't know why it is, but perhaps because Netherlands have some small Christian parties who are always very active in this respect. And of course, we had the Down Syndrome Association, which said, well, it's not the normal thing to do, abortion. It's not the normal thing to do for Down syndrome. And Denmark now has a Down syndrome specific association, but not when it was introduced, I think. That's what they told me, the Danish association. Okay.
Okay. So the next question, in the absence of selective termination, is the live birth rate increasing in time related to medical improvements or related to the better health status of newborns? So the answer there is that the live birth rate increase over time, the non-selective live birth rate increase that we've seen since the 1980s is solely due to the changes in child rearing decisions in families. So the fact that families have been choosing to have children later in life, and the consequence of that is that the chance of having a baby with Down syndrome is higher. So that is the that's the sole driver of increasing live birth rate. You could, there might be a small element of medical improvement in terms of the survival of pregnancies, but I think by and large the bulk of that, I think Gert, you'd agree, would you, that really that's the driver of the increase in the live birth rate. Were you able to find any facts in your study regarding better, longer lifespan when compared? Yes, so there are studies there. I don't, Gert, did you want to comment? But yeah, there is good evidence of the changing life expectancy.
That's what we used in our model. So we made survival curves for different years of birth. Because if you were born as a child with Down syndrome in the 1940s, the chance to die in the first few years of life was very high. Really very high, and that's started to be better year after year since then. Because every time there were new medical developments, welfare goes up. Only in the former Eastern Bloc countries, you see this whole development is later, and probably what it had to do with not giving the children the care they needed. I'm afraid that is the reason. Under communism, they were not seen as very valuable members, maybe still in some countries. But we have modeled it into our study, these huge differences in childhood survival.
Yeah. Could we go to next one? The benefits of the having statistics are obvious, but do you see any danger in them? Can this kind of data be missed, and how can this be prevented?
Well, I think any data can be probably misused by somebody given sufficient willingness. I'm not sure our data could be. I can't think of any ways immediately our data could be terribly misused. Yeah, I don't. If whoever asked that question wants to had anything particular in mind about how it might be misused, maybe they'd like to come back and we could give that some thought.
Yeah, I just could maybe add some experience of some countries, but also I could say Croatia, the data what we are getting from our public healthcare institution, it's very good for us because in that case we could make some plans. We could say to the government what we need exactly, that we need better early education, that we need the schools, that we have in more areas. That means we are using that for the better preparation for our children, and normally later on will be in the other areas as well. Okay, this is our experience. I don't know for others. Okay, statistics and the data always dangerous, depending how many are thinking about that and how they're using that data. But we could always go and use on the better way and present to the government.
That's very much our hope about how this data can be used. I mean, the government's accounting babies terminated, some of the babies born, but they're not making good efforts at informing themselves of the populations. And as I said at the beginning of the talk, that the associations and governments need to understand that if they're going to plan what it takes to properly meet children's educational needs or healthcare needs and the employment needs of adults. If you don't have these numbers, you can't do it.
Yeah. Okay. Next question is from Jacqueline. Do you have in the
hello, Jacqueline.
Do you have any sample in the supplements any data of the person with Down syndrome according to age?
Yes, it's in the supplement. We've got breakdown of population estimates, number of people by 5-year age group. So you can, yeah, it's in the supplement. I think the main paper we did the prevalence graph, but those graphs which I put up region by region of number of people of different age groups, those are in the supplement for the paper by age. Yes.
Yeah.
So for every country.
Yes, if you dig through the supplement, country by country.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Next comment is from it's going up. Michael Clark. Frank, do you see that I don't need to read because everybody
yes,
can see?
I was just reading that one. So
yes. Okay, sorry.
Attempting to get death certificates to identify medical reasons for death rather than just simply stating down yes.
I see the question.
Yes, Gert, would you like to take that one?
We didn't use the death certificates to estimate the population numbers, because the death certificates are not complete. The only thing which we did was looking at the age distribution in the death certificates, whether it was the same as the age distribution which we would predict with our model. That's what we did with the death certificates.
And so I think our answer, Michelle, to your question would be carry on in your efforts to get proper medical reasons listed rather than simply stating Down syndrome. It's a mix already at the moment, and so we can look at a subset that state Down syndrome. If there's any way of them marking both, great. But we should have data. We shouldn't be just stating that people died because they have Down syndrome if there's a clear cause of death other than having Down syndrome.
But they do not always do that. It's just a bit chaotic. it's a doctor who says, this is the primary cause of death. And if a person has Down syndrome, the doctor can say, well, Down syndrome started all the events. So that's the primary cause of death. But the doctor can also say, no, it's the heart failure. So I say the primary cause of death is the heart failure. It is...
But I think we'd like to see more accurate
I would like to know
death certificates.
I would like to know if someone with Down syndrome died, that it happened. But it's not going to work like that. Only in Denmark, I think, because they have a population registry. Oh, and I missaid something about Denmark earlier on. There was a Down syndrome association in that year. But I think now the person who I talked with said, but we were such a young organization and we didn't get the coverage in the media. So.
Let me translate next question.
Thank you.
After the baby is 10 weeks of age, curettage is prohibited in our country. But in a pregnancy with an anomaly, it is extended up to 25 weeks, including Down syndrome. What do you think about it? It's a right approach?
Well, I think it's discriminatory to have one rule for one group of babies and another rule for another group of babies. If I understood that correctly, you're saying that termination is legal at one point in pregnancy for all babies, and then for babies with other conditions, it's later. But that's yeah, I mean that's an ethical judgment. But if there's, I think in this country, terminations are legal right through up to close to birth for babies with certain diagnoses, which is arguably discriminatory, particularly when you can now do the detection. The detection can be done fairly early on.
Okay, could we go to next one? Do you know why some public health institutions don't count people born with Down syndrome?
It's a difficult one. Well, it costs money to organize it, so that can be a reason not to do it. And I sometimes think maybe the authorities think it is just too confronting if people find out how many children are terminated. So we can better keep it a little bit silent. I sometimes think that's the case in Germany, because there is almost no counting. But maybe someone from Germany says that's nonsense, but
yeah, I have just one comment also. Okay, we come back later on for some more on the Zoom, but I have one comment from the Iceland, that is from Inga, and she said she's not sure for the statistic data for the Iceland from 2010 till 2015, because she knows that 38 pregnancies with Down syndrome were all terminated in that period. And she's a little bit concerned about this old data for the Iceland. If you could just comment how you get some data from there.
well, I'm sorry, but I don't know by heart for every country where we got the data. It's in the supplement. I got it from an Icelandic source. There was a PPT, and well, there was official counts of some children with Down syndrome. It might be that it were children from refugees who had come to Iceland, for partly.
Yeah, I have heard that as well, that some refugees came from other country, but this is some pregnancies, what Inga said, that are terminated. That's most probably from Iceland, but she just it's no question. It's just the comment from her, the situation what she knows. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
understand that, but I found this data on an Icelandic official website, and it's in the supplement where I found it. It might be wrong. I mean, that's for all the data. It's always possible that we had an input which was not totally correct.
If you
Yes.
I'd say have a look at the supplement, because the
Yeah.
details of where the data came from and so on are in there.
Yeah.
And then do feel free to drop us an email or something, and we can follow that up. I mean, we'd be pleased to hear if people have got suspicions that their national registries or sources of data are inaccurate or missing something.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
can take that into
I will
account
write. Yes.
in future estimates if we hear about it.
Okay, I will write to Inga that this data, what she has, that she sent to both of you. Thanks.
It's for any country, for any of the countries, if you find better data than we have used,
Let us know.
let us know.
Yeah, I hope, are you, like, my question, are you going to continue with this your work? Because it's very interesting, and you came with, we came from so many countries for the very good data, but we have to continue, I think, this work. If I remember well, this all data until 2015, yeah?
Yes. I mean, I think our plan, and Gert can correct me if I'm wrong, but our plan would be to carry on updating these from time to time as new data comes out from the different registries, like we have done in the States, and then we would update the fact sheet we produce. The journals won't be interested in hearing from us every year, but we can publish a fact sheet, and we've got on our to-do list, but I think it's been there for a few years, Gert, a website with some of the data on, but maybe we'll get to that as well at some point.
It's a good idea.
I think it's on my to-do list.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that would be our ideal, to make the latest data available on a website, and easy to find and easy to access.
What do you think? It's maybe good that we, like association, or maybe ETSA, like European Association, prepare some documents or some mails and send to each country, to that public healthcare, and to little bit to propose to them to take more a little bit about this data, because there are very, very good for all preparation for the next years, and the plan is for the countries. Would you think that we could have some kind of the proposals from this your evaluation, what you did?
Yeah, I think so. And I think in countries that don't have very good data and don't have very well organized registries, it's well worth campaigning for that. And there's a couple of angles there. I think any country that's putting a screening program into practice has an obligation to monitor it, and that means having really national level statistics gathering, like we have in the UK, and they've got in the Netherlands and so on, and it is becoming more extensive. Even if you can't get national level, there should still be robust regional. And I think most countries have got something. I think everybody believes there's an important reason for monitoring the health of newborn babies. So they would be looking at a variety of conditions that can occur at birth, and looking to count them and to make population level assessments and so on. So it doesn't have to be this is a Down syndrome specific request. Mm-hmm. It's a good public health practice to be gathering good data on the health of your babies. And I mean, the vast majority of countries do something, but the quality of what they do varies. I mean, even wealthy countries like the US, they don't have national level, and a lot of the states don't even have state level but there are a lot of regional registries that you can gather data from and form a national picture based on. So the ideal would be national coverage, but in the absence of that, good quality regional registries in different countries.
Yes, Julia, do we have some more questions that we not answered yet?
Yes, as a result of all these data, what are your personal opinions about the reason of the decrease or the increase in pregnancy and birth rates of babies with Down syndrome in worldwide?
Well, the data doesn't give us directly a huge amount of insight into reasons for these for changing trends beyond the ones I've mentioned so far, which is the changing practices in terms of child rearing, length of time people spend in education, increasing proportion of women who are entering the workplace and staying in the workplace and so on, which have led to families having children later in life, which has led to an increase in the expected live birth prevalence that's then been counteracted by the technological changes and the policy changes that have brought screening programs into being. In terms of getting any more detail as to what those is driving some of those trends and the differences we see between countries, that's ongoing work really, to explore what might be some of the factors there.
I saw there was a question if England will still be continued to be included in European statistics. The answer is yes.
In Eurocat, I think, yes.
Yeah, but also in our work.
Yes, yeah, we're not Brexiting from the population statistics.
No. I mean, it was stupid, your Brexit, but okay.
There was a follow-up on the misuse of data question. If more and more people are, so the idea that if we've got data that more and more women are choosing termination, it sends a signal it's the right thing to do. Yeah, yes, I mean that could be it normalizes it if we can see the statistics. Yes, the flip side of that is it's the reduction rate is in most places far from 100%. So most countries, the European average was what, 50-something% at the moment. And I suppose one of the questions is, why is that? Why do we see some countries with a reduction rate of 80 and some with much lower? But the counter to that is there are still, the data shows there are a lot of people who don't choose screening, or if they choose to screen, they don't choose to terminate. As I've said, that exploring some of the reasons for that is something we want to look into further.
I think in the Netherlands, the data actually helped in the discussion in saying, well, it's a lot of people who get a lot of pregnancies who are terminated. Is that the right thing to do? So it also gave a debate on television and in the media, which in a way was helpful.
And I think sometimes people have the mistaken view that people with Down syndrome are going away or aren't going to be here in a few years, and 8,000 babies a year and hundreds of thousands of people alive today across Europe it makes it clear that's not happening, and not going to happen immediately.
No.
I mean, I think it's still largely guesswork to try and figure out what's going to happen as non-invasive tests become more widespread. But even if they were to roll out faster, have a faster impact than the previous generation of screening tests, you're still not going to see a complete elimination of the population, and certainly not within the next couple of decades, I wouldn't imagine.
And
I could be wrong.
There
but-
seem to be huge cultural differences between countries. Also, in countries where everyone can do the screening, there are such big differences. And you see it also with the NIPT, because in the Netherlands, all women now can do it as the first test. And the first year it started was 2017. In 2018, there were a little bit less births of children with Down syndrome, but it was a very modest effect. But in Belgium, in Flanders, in the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium, you see a much bigger effect of this NIPT, a much bigger drop in number of births of children with Down syndrome. So there seems to be cultural differences. I don't know why.
Well, and differences in how programs are implemented. I mean, there is some hints in some of the regional data in England. You can see one health authority where they have a very different reduction rate or a very different uptake of screening rate from a neighbouring authority, and some of that might be cultural, but there are instances where you can't really explain that by just cultural differences in the populations, and that may boil down to how good they are at counselling and providing people with information and ensuring they get proper informed consent and so on. So there's all sorts of things in there that are making a difference.
It's probably influenced by many different variables. I also think, for instance, I know a difference between the Netherlands and Flanders is that in the Netherlands, many women work part-time and many men work a bit part-time. And in the Flanders, most parents both work full-time. But I suppose that makes a difference for what you think as a family you can cope with. It's my own private theory about the difference, that might play a role.
Well, we will continue to track these trends over time.
Well,
some of these questions will become clearer. Some of the answers to these questions will become clearer over time.
I've put Icelandic information.
Yes. Gert, I already put, I sent that info to the lady from Iceland. Yeah, thanks a lot.
I
It's
hope
on
the
the
website, the link still works, but this is the link where I got it from.
Great. It's one very interesting comments and question. How can organizations which have connection to parents help ETSA to raise awareness amongst future parents or individuals who may be in the two minds?
That's a question for ETSA.
Yes, but you are also ETSA. We are all ETSA, mostly.
I think all national associations have a role to play in ensuring good quality, accurate, up-to-date, non-biased information is available to expectant parents. And one would imagine ETSA could be helping provide background data and examples on how to do that. Should be a good thing.
I always also think it helps when you have like little films, videos, which show that life with a child with Down syndrome isn't a disaster that people think it is.
With one caveat, which is that information does need to be evidence-based. So I think that you don't want to fall into the trap of going too far the other way and
I see
and glossing over some of the challenges that there are and some of the differences in terms of life expectancy and so on. So it's got to be unbiased, it's got to be accurate, it's got to be evidence-based. And you'll find some counsellors and some health authorities would be very anti things like videos and so on, which they think are too emotive and therefore not accurate enough, which I'm not sure I necessarily agree with that. But it is important that overall things are balanced, and I think you'll find if you don't have if you don't offer carefully balanced information, you won't get the buy-in from the health profession
No,
and the
you're right.
counsellors, and
Honestly,
they'll ignore you anyway. So you do need to take a balanced and evidence-based approach if you're going to get buy-in from those groups.
yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I think that we mostly, okay, fully only this question, well, I don't know what is
Okay.
open is still.
Yes,
Could you
it's
translate?
about how we can include Turkey into this research, or are you planning to? Are you planning a? Yeah. Are you planning a?
Let us know where we can find some data on births in Turkey, and we'll have a look at it. We might need some help with the translation.
Yeah, if we can email about it.
Yeah,
It's always interesting to
to
look if we can find out more information about a country.
Actually, in Turkey, we don't have any data about people with Down syndrome. This is our difficulty. So
Well,
maybe you can help us to. You can give us some tips how we can ask to the authorities about numbers. For example, are we going to ask ICD codes? For example, how many by using ICD codes, or just asking about numbers of people with Down syndrome? I don't know, am I clear?
I think you could also ask this question to people like Dinka, because I think you did it in your country, get information from the authorities.
Yes, Fulya, we did that on the way that we asked, please, could you send us information how many persons in your register of the person with disabilities are with the Q90? And we got that all information. Even I got, now this is information for Frank and the Gert, I got from the 1st of February how many exactly persons with Down syndrome we have in Croatia. Finally, they joined 2 registers, and we have a very good now data about persons with Down syndrome. And I could say that we have even one person older than 85 years.
Wow.
Yes.
Could you send me the new
Yes, I will send you both these documents. I got documents about how many born, and also I was asking for the other Q90s, 91, 90, and up to 99 because of some other analysis. And also we got how many persons died since 1997 till this year.
I want to have all the information.
Yes.
There's also
only what I don't have, Gert, I don't have information how many years that person had when they died. I don't have that information, but I could ask our authorities to see that.
Okay.
Fulya, I think, I don't know for other countries, but maybe in other countries we have to go and say, according to the, I think, UN proposal, each country has to have evidence how many persons with disability they have. That means they have to have some kind of the registers. But it's a question how they will start with that register and how fill in that register. With this, because this Eurocat, what they have just for the births in the hospital, there are not good, they don't have a good information. So many hospitals and the groups, they stop that even 15 years to count. Because I'm in this involved in my country nearly 20 years. And I'm following this whole process in our country, how we could do that. And Fulya, I could suggest you how we did that. Maybe it could help you.
Fulya, do you have any idea about prenatal screening in Turkey? Is that a normal thing, or is that only some women who do it? How is it?
Let me explain it in Turkish, and let interpreter translate it into English. Türkiye'deki tarama testleri 36 yaş üstü anneler için öneriliyor, amniyosentez öneriliyor. İnvaziv olmayan bu kanla yapılan testler onlar henüz şey değil, ücretli olarak yapıldığı için çok yaygın değil ama amniyosentez devlet tarafından karşılanıyor. Ama ailelerin büyük bir kısmı bunu yaptırmak istemiyorlar. Nasıl olsa bebeği doğuracağız, aldırmayacağız diye amniyosentez yaptırmamayı tercih eden çok aile var, düşük riski var diye.
Fulya, could we get translation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Did that
Yeah.
answer your question? Did you get the translation, Gert?
No?
No, I didn't.
Ah.
get it.
No, we didn't got a translation. We just have heard
Can you
you.
tell me what it was, Frank?
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's quite long. Shall we follow that up
Yeah,
Okay.
we could maybe,
afterwards?
yes, we
Okay,
could
sure.
make a
Yeah.
call a little bit later.
Later.
But yes, we have one good example in Sweden. I don't know, Gert and Frank, could you see that from the Micken
Mhm.
Lyning?
Yes, yeah.
Swedish
This is a-
network. Yeah.
Yes,
Uh,
maybe it's good.
It's very good.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a very good approach.
Yes.
Sweden doesn't have this very high reduction percentage. I mean, it's next to Denmark, but it's really a different country.
Yeah. No, that sounds excellent. A network of health professionals, ethics professionals, the National Down Syndrome Organization. That's very good.
Yeah.
That's
Thanks a
a
lot.
good model for others to consider.
And Michelle Clark asked us, please let us know how we can support your continued efforts.
Let us know if new data appears in your country. That's the single most important thing is being able to track down every last bit of data we can find, even if it's slightly tangential to what we're doing. It can be used to validate, cross-check what we're doing. So any data about numbers of people, numbers of babies,
Use of screening.
Yeah. Yeah.
And especially if
it's all very helpful.
especially if information is not in English, it's difficult for us to read it. So
Yeah,
to find
help
it.
us. Yes, to find it. Yeah. So yes, please do it. I'm sure my email address is available somewhere. But yeah, and I suspect Gert's is available somewhere. So that's the way to help us. And to track, I suppose the other thing is to monitor changes in your country. So when do policies change? When does what they're doing in terms of screening or screening availability, or whether it's covered on national health programs or not, or in insurance or not. So knowing about that is helpful, particularly when we're starting now to try and look at what accounts for the differences between different countries and what accounts for differences within countries over time.
Yes.
We can't do that if we don't have markers in time as to when things changed. So that would be super helpful for us.
Yes.
If people are keeping a record of the history around this.
Yes, we are nearly okay. Maybe we have 5 minutes more. Do we have some more comments, questions? Gert and Frank, do you have something more to tell us?
Oh yeah.
For the end.
Well, maybe it's a detail, but if you said in the richer countries, there's still, if the country is more rich, there is a higher reduction. But it's not true if you only look at the very rich countries above 35,000. If you take them apart, it's even the other way around. The most rich countries have less reduction than the middle countries. Well, it was not significant statistically though, but it's it looks like if a country gets really rich, expectant parents more often think, well, we want this child and cope with it. We have the resources.
But I think that
Go
is
on,
also connected with the culture of the countries.
Yeah, sure.
And the possibility to have services that support the family and the people with Down syndrome.
Yes, of course, there are many factors. It's not simple, because we also thought if a country is more religious, you would expect
Also,
less reduction, but it's not true. Because the large Catholic countries in Southern Europe have very high reduction, most of them. So Italy, Spain, Portugal, high reduction. I had not expected that.
and another reason, I suppose, is also the imaging of people with Down syndrome in that country, because I have seen the image, the idea that the people have of a person with Down syndrome in this country. I have seen in Italy many connections in this aspect in the decision of interrupt or not the pregnancy, connected also with the moment in which we have had in television a lot of opportunity to know the people with Down syndrome in a different way. And I have met a lot of families that are expecting a baby. They have to decide, but they have an idea different of the toward the past about who is a person with Down syndrome now.
Yes, the image is important. Yes.
Yes, we have just one more comment from Tiziana Nardini. Maybe Tiziana, you could get in the contact direct with the Frank and the Gert, because did you find easily data about Luxembourg? Because their like association didn't find that very easy.
Oh no, Luxembourg was hopeless. To find information on Luxembourg was really impossible. So Luxembourg is wild guessing. We just said, okay, Luxembourg is between Belgium, Germany, and France. Belgium, Germany, France look a little bit like each other. So, well, perhaps Luxembourg looks like these three countries. There were a few countries we really had to guess. That was Greece and Luxembourg. I'm sorry.
So please, if you can
find
push somebody to produce some data, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, Tiziana, I hope you have heard, and maybe we could do that together. You and some suggestion from other countries where is a better situation about this data. Okay, just 2 minutes more. Thank Fred. Take Pat.
Just briefly, no, if you mentioned Greece. Now, I have very good contacts with the whole disability sector in Greece. So if you send me on the sort of information, Frank, you'd have my email address. I will put that to the Disability Federation in Greece.
Good.
And see what sort
That'd
of
be very helpful.
they can come up with.
Thanks, Pat.
Thank you.
Yes, we have one to communicate. In Denmark, we started cooperation with the health professionals in 2013. Among other things, we offer contact families for couples who get a prenatal diagnosis and for new friends. Thanks for information. And also one question from Tatiana, it's does the religion influence the reduction rates? I think we already answered on that, like example, Malta or some other countries, what you comment?
Well, there are countries in which religious ideas have had a political translation into abortion is not allowed. So that was Malta and Ireland, and I think Northern Ireland up till a few years ago. But otherwise, some very religious countries have high reduction rates. So it's not a very straightforward connection. I suppose for individual people, their religion can be an important factor, but you don't see it back in the large numbers.
I think the reality is that all of these things probably play a small part in teasing apart what different different things are doing is quite difficult. Even though we're looking at it, we may not actually be able to do it.
Just one comment from the Facebook from Rasha Hosali. Just for your information, on our platform DS21, Make Them Fly, responses from Gert for the questions related to statistics remain some of the viewed queries. So there is something that parents loved about statistics. I don't know, Gert, could you go also to our Facebook site, and maybe I could send you later on that we see together, you and I, these comments from the Hosali.
Maybe that's better because I did not.
Yes, we could do. Yes, I will send you a connection, and we could go and look at you and I on that. Okay. I would like really to thanks to really great this work from Frank, Gert, and also Brian Skotko. Unfortunately, Brian Skotko couldn't be with us because he's working in United States in this time when we have a webinar, but he will be able to look our record on our Facebook site, and very soon we will have also on the YouTube, and we will inform you whether this is ready. I would like to thanks to all of you who participate on our webinar together today, and let's see on the next webinar the next month in the similar time, third Wednesday in April. Thanks, Frank and Gert, once again.
Thank you.
Thank you, and have a nice evening, and take care about all of you.